if I bleed tonight, if I am sad tonight, I don't have a job to find. And if I work tonight, if I'm so tired tonight, I'll fall asleep when I'm home, when I'm home.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of the SummerSlam podcast. We're almost a decade, well not a decade old, but 10 weeks old. Anyway, I'm Kenny McIntosh. That was a really crap analogy. And I'm joined by the Emperor of SummerSlam City. He is the man behind SummerSlam for 20 odd years and Superstars of Wrestling, and now the author of the SummerSlam ebook series that you can get on Amazon and also at finleymartin.co.uk. It is Finn Martin. Hi Finn.
Hello, Kenny, and thanks again for a glorious introduction. I mean, how do I follow that introduction? I'm not sure if I can. Maybe we should just end the podcast now.
But then we need to do the awkward ending where we don't know who ends it. So.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we can't deprive the listeners of that.
So, yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter podcast this week because I, unfortunately, have decided it'd be a good idea to move house and go on holiday on the same day in about 4 hours. So, we're going to do a kind of 45 minutes. It'll be a bit more kind of quick fire with the topics. I think there's a lot of topics we should get into. So let's just get straight into it. Let's get into some of the topics that have been happening. One that I've talked about already, a lot of people have, but you've not really had a chance to talk about it. Austin Aries chose to get his release from WWE about a week ago. Were you shocked to hear this? And what do you think of Aries deciding that being part of the Cruiserweight division wasn't enough for him and deciding to take the plunge and leave at 39 years of age?
I wasn't really surprised by it because the nature of his loss to Neville at Extreme Rules on June 4th, that submission loss, it had a ring of finality to it. It really did. It's like, where's he going to go from here? I think we talked about this at the time. I remember writing something on Facebook and saying, well, I'm not sure where Aries goes next. He couldn't challenge Neville again. The loss was so decisive that I think it would have precluded him from being pushed as a serious heavyweight. It really felt like the end of the line for him there. And they didn't do anything with him after that. He made an appearance on 205 Live to sort of say that he was injured. And it was just very much killing time because they didn't really know what they were going to do next with him. So to me, I think he had a good little run there in WWE. He came in, made some money, upped his Twitter followers, upped his profile. His asking price on the independent circuit and elsewhere will now be higher than it was before he climbed into bed with WWE. To me, Extreme Rules was the end of the line for him. I absolutely understand the decision. I think it's probably the right decision for him in the long run. So not surprised at all. Were you surprised by it, Kenny?
No, not hugely surprised. I kind of... David obviously does the Raw Rundown. Him and I were talking about the fact that where does he go next? After the whole losing to Neville, does he just become one of these cruiserweights that are just kind of there? I do want to ask you a question though, because this is something that I'd kind of talked about. He obviously wanted to be more of a part of the company than just a cruiserweight on 205 Live. Not to say that's not, a valid place to be, but he felt that he should have been more. Do you think within the current landscape of WWE on Raw and SmackDown that there was enough room for Austin Aries on the main roster, or do you think that the 205 Live division was kind of just where he was going to get to and that was going to be it for him?
I think that was probably as far as he was going to go. In hindsight, when he came in, I hoped that he would go further because we all saw how well he did in TNA. As champion, he had that terrific run there in 2011, 2012, wasn't it?
Yeah, when he was the X Division champ and he cashed it in to get the world title shot and all that sort of stuff. Really,
right.
Hogan's best TNA promo with Austin Aries.
Absolutely. Hogan was there putting someone else over, and it really felt like, because Aries had that run in TNA back in 2007, I think it was 2006, 2007 as Austin Starr, which was, a bit of it was almost like a comedy role. He left the company, went back to Ring of Honor, then returned to TNA. I think it was 2011 he went back. I could be wrong about that. I think that's about right. And he had that, and the expectations for him were not great. But I mean, he just did so well. Such a terrific in-ring performer, really good promo guy. The thing I liked about Aries was he really believed in himself. You could see there's a guy that had absolute confidence, absolute faith in his own abilities and in his own talent to go as far as the company would have allowed him to. That in many circles in wrestling, that's seen as arrogance, that's seen as conceit, that's seen as a disadvantage. And I know some people, such as Jim Cornette, for instance, has said that Aries had that sort of attitude backstage when he was working for Ring of Honor. So I mean, I do, and I actually did an interview with Aries back in, was it late 2007 or very early 2008, and there was a few tense moments there in the interview. It was because I was basically challenging him on stuff, and he was not taking it. He was letting me know that he wasn't going to be pushed around on the interview. So I always, when I was doing interviews with people, you would really ask them some difficult questions to get the really good answers. That's what you've got to do. So he was a guy that was very sure of himself and wasn't going to allow himself to be pushed around at all. And I think that was his attitude in wrestling. So if he didn't feel that he was getting what he wanted or what he felt he deserved from a company, then he was going to move on.
Yeah, and I do wonder where he goes. I don't know where, because, he's not got a great relationship with Ring of Honor. He's not got a great relationship with Global Force Wrestling. It really takes a lot for me to have to call it that now. Have you heard, by the way, the new ethos on the conference call from Jeff Jarrett about what the distinction is between Impact and GFW? Have you heard about this?
No, I have not.
So from now on, Global Force Wrestling is the promotion, and Impact Wrestling is the television show.
Yes, I did know that. I did already know that, but
I mean that's like saying World Wrestling Entertainment presents the World Wrestling Federation.
Well, one thing that's slightly confusing, I watched last week's Impact Wrestling in preparation for this podcast. And
you're a glutton for punishment, Finn. You really are.
Alberto El Patron, who we may be talking about in a moment on an entirely different subject, was pictured there with two belts. One is the Global Force Wrestling belt, and the other is the TNA World Heavyweight title. So talk about confusion. You've got GFW, the company, Impact Wrestling, the program, and he's wearing a title belt that's got TNA written on it. But apparently they are having a new belt made to replace the two belts, which will eliminate the confusion, Kenny, once and for all, right?
Well, also, the last time they were actually called TNA?
Yeah.
What, was it 6 months ago?
Yeah, well, yeah, last year, wasn't it?
So why is there still a belt saying TNA?
That's right, yeah, he was there. And the thing is, they could have shot the belt in a slightly different way so we didn't see the TNA logo.
The thing is, Calling Spots magazine have got their own belt, and they got that quicker. A magazine has the belt that they take to wrestlers and get pictures with for their social media. They got a belt quicker. Come on, Jeff. Get your arse in line, come on.
I mean, we're working on a budget here in TNA, Impact Wrestling, Global Force Wrestling, Kenny. Alberto El Patron's celebration, his title celebration on last week's Impact, was one of the naffest things you've ever seen.
I've not seen it. What was so naff about it?
Well, they had like two Mexican flags, one table with like a black bit of cloth over it, one bottle of, probably wasn't even Prosecco, it was probably sparkling wine, never mind champagne. I think it was like two glasses. That was it. That was it. That was the set.
But why, maybe they just wanted to have a minimalist celebration. Why over egg it, you know?
Well, that's yeah. Why spend?
Well, it's not as bad as Slammiversary when they practically had an orgy after he won the belt with the Jarretts and Nordholm and Scott D'Amore, whatever his name is. All these people in the ring celebrating with Alberto El Patron. You're like, why are they all there?
maybe they blew the budget on the plane tickets. You know what I mean? Maybe that was it.
Now, so yeah, let's talk about the Alberto thing. I did say on the Raw Rundown, I kind of slated Global Force a little bit for not taking any action over Alberto, but I take it back. They have taken some action. I think that's really good of them to do it. Fair play. They have suspended Alberto El Patron indefinitely while this situation plays out. So the thing that I wanted to say...
one thing there, Kenny, it doesn't really make any difference, though, does it? Because they've taped all the TV up to the middle of next month. They're not going to be editing him out of any of the TV programs.
Well, that's true, because apparently, I think it was yesterday, Dave Meltzer had reported that he had a source in Global Force who had said to him, "This is a disaster. You know, we have this guy who we've suspended, but he's our world champion, and he's the pivotal part of TV for the next 6 weeks. We can't take him out." But at least, you know, even if it's just, at least there seemed to be taking some form of action. I needed to see something. And, you know, without going into detail, I have personally had conversations with Alberto. Obviously, we were supposed to do the live Inside the Rope show in Birmingham that we decided to cancel, which was not a decision that I made very easily, and it was my decision, not Alberto's. He was 100% committed to showing up to that. I want to say that right now. And there's no way I would discuss personal conversations that he and I had. And I'm not saying that he is innocent, or because obviously the evidence does not look good. But at the same time, I think the problem is that everybody seems to be, you know, saying they know what's going on. I don't really think anybody knows what's going on, and that's the difficulty. And but it seems like a very bad situation, you know. So you have the audio of the fight they had at the airport, which I've not listened to because I just don't want to give that sort of stuff hits. It's just not for me. But I guess for people who don't know, because I'm rambling on, what I was meaning to say by that is just like, I get it that, you know, Paige should absolutely get away from him because the two of them seem to be bad news for each other. All I'm saying is none of us really know what's going on, and while the probability is it's a certain way, I think sometimes we're quick to condemn people when we don't really know the situation. But anyway, so the whole situation that's come out, the latest fight that they've had, is they were at an airport, Alberto and Paige, and they had a fight, sort of verbal fight. The police were called over, and Alberto was I don't
wasn't arrested, was he? He was just, I think he was just, wasn't the word detained?
Yeah,
wasn't
detained.
That the word?
Yeah, detained. He was detained. So, and then since then, Paige had said that, you know, it was to do with she got some bad news about, I think, an uncle of hers who's in hospital. But then following that, the audio came out that somebody had recorded. And then following that, her brothers put a Facebook status out where they basically said that he is beating her. And yeah, it's not good. What do you think about the whole situation?
I mean, I think it's really sad situation. You're right. I mean, these two appears to be a toxic relationship. It's almost like I don't think Sean Waltman would object to me bringing this up because, I mean, he freely admitted how toxic his relationship with China was. It almost seems like a sort of modern version of that to me. I just think they seem to be really bad for each other. I mean, the post from Roy Beavis on July 11th was really demoralizing to read. You know, he put on Facebook, "I love my sister," and he then added, "She will end up like Whitney Houston or Amy Winehouse," which, you know, we all hope that is not the case, that doesn't happen. For me, it's like if Alberto El Patron hasn't been arrested yet, it sort of seems like he probably won't be. And he does seem to be Teflon in these situations. And let's face it, Kenny, there's been quite a few incidents over the last year, hasn't there?
Yeah, no, there has been a lot. I mean, I would be very, very surprised if he is completely innocent in anything. But at the same time, it's just tough. It's like, I'm one of these people, I hate to sort of like condemn something that I'm not 100% knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
But I think what seems more likely to me, and I think that there has been physicality. You know, I think there's too much evidence to say there hasn't been. But I think what it seems to me is that from what I've heard from people who are around them is that they're just not good for each other.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with
They're
that.
just, they're volatile. And also, you got to remember, like, he's a 40-year-old Mexican guy who is got temper issues, and she is a 23-year-old young English girl with temper issues. Like, and then, maybe they go out and have a cocktail or two or something else, and then, all of it's like a bad concoction of stuff.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
But then, like, what do you think is the for GFW? Did they make a mistake by making him the world champion, or how do you think they should handle this going forward?
I think what they'll do is, they're not really under any pressure to do anything now because they've taped TV for the next 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it is.
But does this actually harm their? Because obviously the whole Hardy situation had happened, and then Global Force were kind of like, now we've done Slammiversary and we've got a little bit of a good momentum behind us because the show was decent, it was fine. And this is not what they need right now.
No, absolutely not. He's their Alberto's their new champion. They actually did a pretty hot angle at the end of last week's Impact, where Alberto was introduced as the newest member of LAX. So they're like the team with with loads of titles and everything. So that was a huge angle. It's actually pretty damn good angle. It was well done, I felt. I haven't read the spoilers for future episodes of Impact Wrestling and don't like to give them away anyway, but it seemed to me to be a double turn with Lashley turning face, Alberto El Patron turning heel. That seems to be what's going to happen from this point forward. So he is going to be a huge part of TV for the next few weeks. So I absolutely understand why, the predicament they were in. He wasn't just somebody doing like a match here and there. He's like the champion and part of their biggest angle. So I'm not sure how they would have handled that if they really felt like they had to remove him from TV. I'm not sure if that would have been possible. It would have made a real mess of things. GFW is not really under any pressure to do anything until the police decide if they're going to press charges or they're not going to press charges. Obviously, if they press charges, at that point, they're probably going to have to strip him of the title or the titles. And that could well be the end of his run in that company. If there's no further action, which I'm not going to say what I think is going to happen, but if there's no further police action, then I think it'll just blow over and everything will just carry on as normal. That's my prediction. It all depends on what the police do.
Yeah, well, Jeff Jarrett did do a conference call yesterday and he was asked about it and he said that, they're looking into what exactly they should be doing. And somebody had asked about, would Alberto be edited out of any of the tape shows? And he said that they are not planning on that because that would further damage the brand.
Yeah. It's a tricky one. Had he been arrested, had he been charged, I think they would have been forced to remove him from TV and probably done emergency tapings. I'm not sure how they would have handled that. That hasn't happened yet. He hasn't even, let's face it, he hasn't even been arrested yet for this. So, let's just put that out there. And we know this is a bad relationship. We're all well aware of this. We've been aware of this for basically a year or so. So no one's condoning the things that have happened. I'm just looking at this from GFW's point of view. So
I feel kind of bad for them because as much as I rag on them for different stuff, which I think they should be ragged on, like how they can have a Twitter handle called GFW Wrestling, which means Global Force Wrestling. Yeah. Come on. Especially when, do you know Global Force Wrestling as a Twitter handle is available?
Oh, is it?
You can't make it up. Anyway.
I'm not condoning it, right? I'm absolutely not condoning any of this. I think this is a bad relationship for both of these two. And I think Paige and Alberto, I just think they should go their separate ways in life. That's what I think should happen.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel bad for GFW. I feel bad for the situation they're in. But at the same time, playing devil's advocate, if you have a guy who... So when did they put the belt on him, the first belt?
It's a few months ago now. a few months ago now. And then, of course, they unified it at Slammiversary a week last Sunday. But I know what you're going to say. You're right. The guy's got a track record. Do you put your titles on a guy with his track record? That is the mistake.
Randy Orton for a while, they wouldn't put any belt on Randy Orton in WWE for a while when he had a lot of issues. He had like a 2-strike thing or whatever. And he had some time where it was like, you're going to prove yourself again. You need to kind of, and I think that's the risk that you take. And if you put someone with that kind of record and you put the belt on them, then it's not a risk. But then at the same time, they want that role that Alberto had was originally going to be for Drew, and Drew left. Yeah. So they had to find somebody, and he was the guy that they went with. So.
It's a tough one to know what to do because, I mean, in a way you look back and say, well, why this guy's got a track record? Why are you trusting this guy with your title? Why not give him 6 months? But they brought him in to make him champion. So, yeah, the decision was obviously the wrong one. I mean, because had they put the title on someone else, they would now not be in this position. El Patron would not be the focal point of the TV show, and they could just edit him out. And in fact, they could just cut him loose and say, you are bad for our brand, you are bad news, we cannot associate with you while you're creating these headlines that we want nothing to do with. We cannot condone what these things that are happening outside the ring. A year from now, if you've sorted yourself out, give us a call. That's really the best position GFW that's the position GFW would like to be in, but of course it set itself up for this situation, for these problems, by giving him the titles in the first place. So there is no easy answers. And when I was saying that GFW is not under any pressure to do anything, what I meant by that was they've taped TV, they've decided they're going to let the TV run, and they're probably waiting to see whether or not the police press charges. If they do, I think at that point they need to just strip him of the title and get rid of him, to just send a message to the world that we absolutely abhor this type of conduct. That's what I would do if I was in Jeff Jarrett's position, if the police choose to press charges. And lots of people could add to that, yeah, Finlay, but there's all this other evidence of stuff that's happened. Yeah, of course there is. But, we'll be here all day if we start talking about that. And again, it's one of those things of, they shouldn't have done that. Yeah, you're right, they shouldn't have done. But we are now in this position. It's what do they do now? It's not what they should have done because they've already done it. They're now in this position. It's how do they handle it from here? I personally believe if there's no charges pressed, I still think GFW should probably take the title off him at the next tapings and really kind of say farewell to him, because chances are if him and Paige stay together, past performance, Kenny, is the best indicator of future behaviour.
But then they've also got to be careful, because if they release him, he's under a contract,
Well, he is. That's right.
So they're kind of in this weird position now where they've given him a pretty big money contract for what money they have, and their back's kind of against the wall. And I think you're right. In an ideal scenario, you would absolutely want to kind of say, okay, let's part ways here. But if they do that, they could have a lawsuit in their hands, and I think that's the last thing they want to have right now, is another one of those.
Yeah, but the thing is, if it's all about, you just have to pay him off. You just got to eat it. You just got to say, right, that was a mistake dealing with this guy. We made a mistake there. And you know what? The wrestling business, wrestling fans, I think would respect them if they were to do that, if they can afford to do that.
Well, Anthem can
sometimes, you've got to make these decisions in the best interests, in terms of what is morally right. And, the word morally is one that sometimes you can't really use in connection with pro wrestling, Kenny, as you well know.
It is difficult. Well, I guess the easiest segue, there's a lot of WWE stuff to talk about. At the Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view, arguably match of the night, the match that everyone was talking about, was the Tag Team Iron Man match, which was just sensational. The Hardy Boys against Cesaro and Sheamus. We would, after the match, when Matt Hardy was kind of busted open, he would kind of do a facial twitch, which made everyone, including me, have a noise of glee, thinking, is he breaking before our very eyes? And then the next night on Raw, he and Jeff would make some very, very obvious teases where Jeff said, some of the tag teams in WWE feel that we should fade away and classify ourselves as obsolete. And then Matt said, we're a little bit broken. So, but to make things even more complicated, now Rebby Hardy has gone on Twitter and said to Jeff Jarrett, last week we had a deal, and last week we came to an agreement. Now Jeff Jarrett's saying we don't have an agreement on a conference call. What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. So I guess to kind of tie the whole Hardy thing in together, talk a little bit about the Iron Man tag team match at the pay-per-view, and then the fact that they put over 2 teams on Monday at Raw, and also the broken thing. So just a loaded question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the match was fabulous. I mean, it sort of started I didn't like the start of it, where Sheamus pinned Matt Hardy at the 19-second mark. I always think that's really just so unrealistic in the parameters of pro wrestling, that we have an Iron Man match and someone, does a job within like the first 19 seconds, first minute or whatever. I always think that's a bit sort of ridiculous and far-fetched within the parameters of pro wrestling, of course. But I felt the match really came alive in the second half. And the ending was just it was some of the best timing I've ever seen. Cesaro pinned Jeff with 29 seconds to go. And at that point, Cesaro and Sheamus then went 4-3 ahead. So it was 29 seconds to go, and Cesaro scored this sort of fluke pin on Jeff. Then Cesaro ran away from Jeff outside the ring. Jeff's in hot pursuit at ringside. They get back in the ring, and often when these things happen, there's hesitation, and you can see they're just dragging it out to make sure that it's timed properly, and it's never smooth. But this was so smooth, Kenny. Jeff got out of him, hit him with a twist of fate, got him down, made the cover, but time ran out before the referee could count 3. And the timing of this was one of the best things I've seen in, I don't know, this decade, possibly. I just thought it was absolutely superb.
Yeah, and I was on the edge of my seat at that last moment, even though you kind of know, right? Like, you get it towards the end, you go, he's not going to get the pinfall in time. But the how great they all were is they had you buying, oh, come on, there's like 2 seconds, I found myself getting very invested in it. And I think that's a testament to them that they were able to get everyone, so invested for that final couple of seconds.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And really just it's the old heel psychology thing where the heels have to go ahead, and they were like 3-1 up at one point, and then the Hardys made the big comeback, and it's just as old as the business itself, but it always works, and that was so well done as well. I was trying to work out how Matt cut himself open, and I think it was on the dive from the top rope. I think he busted himself open. I watched it a couple of times, and that's where I think the hard way cut occurred. I think, did he say the next day he had, was it 9 stitches?
Yeah, it was 9 stitches. I couldn't work out where it was. Like, I couldn't work out where he'd done it, but you might be right. It might have been the dive. That's about right time.
I think, what happened was both of them came off the top rope at the same time, Matt and Jeff. And I think Matt, I don't know how he did it, but I think he was the one who basically cut himself open, from what I could see anyway. So, yeah, really enjoyed the match. Really enjoyed it. What other matches on the show did you really like, Kenny?
I'll be honest, I thought that with Great Balls of Fire, the first... I'm trying to remember the exact order of the matches. I'll get them up as we're talking here.
It was Bray Wyatt and Seth Rollins opened the show.
And I thought that match was just the most boring... it wasn't that the wrestling was bad, it's just, I just didn't care about it. And I thought it was... At first I was kind of like, they've got a big match to start the show. But I just found myself, I couldn't get into it at all. And so you had that, and then I thought the Enzo and Cass match was a bit of a letdown because, Enzo cut this really passionate promo, and then he just kind of got killed. So I thought that the 30-minute Iron Man match elevated it from a so-so pay-per-view to just giving it this real jolt of electricity, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you're right. But I think last week I said that I would have liked Enzo to win that first match, to give us some hope. And he did that amazing promo with all the references to Frank Sinatra's song "That's Life," and you watch it, and you're thinking, that's life, isn't it, Enzo? And then he wasn't on Raw the next night, which is never a good sign.
It's not. I do think though that Cass, I really enjoyed Cass's promo at the beginning of Raw. and his thing with the Big Show, I thought that he did really well within the parameters of what he had to do. So fair play to him. You know, I still think Enzo is the bigger star, but I thought that what Cass did was effective.
Yes, I mean, you're right. I mean, Cass did do well on the mic the next night, and Show, no doubt, will do the job, especially after it. Oh, remember a few weeks ago, Kenny, we were going to talk about his appearance on the Chris Jericho podcast, and we never did get round to that.
Because he randomly was like, "Oh, I love working house shows. TV days are terrible, though."
Yeah. And the
and
thought did occur to me.
Sometimes they give me stuff to do, and I just go, "Why am I doing this?"
And I think Show's going to pay for those comments in this feud with Cass.
Yeah, of course he is. Of course he is. But I thought that so obviously then we had the women's match on the pay-per-view.
Yeah,
I thought they did I felt bad for them that they had to follow that Iron Man match, but I thought they did a really good job with what they had.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even really mind count out finish. I thought it was a good match then because there was so much goodwill. They built up so much goodwill in our hearts with the Iron Man match. You could sort of forgive them for the count out finish. And I felt they did a really good job in the match. I felt Sasha looked really comfortable. I mean, I think a lot of time last year, she sort of looked like she wasn't fully confident in herself. And a lot of times when she was taking bumps and stuff last year, you felt like she was out of control and could really do herself a serious injury. She seems a lot more relaxed now. She
also feels like a star more than Bayley does. You know, Bayley just kind of felt a bit, against Alexa Bliss, but Sasha really carries herself, I think.
Definitely. And I think she's calmed down. She's not doing quite as many dangerous things now, which is, indicative of her being comfortable in herself and comfortable in her repertoire and knowing that her repertoire is over. And now I'm just about to contradict myself, Kenny. After the match, she then did that. She did that double knee thing off the announcer's table. And that was a nice little sort of make good. That was your compensation for the count out finish. The only thing I didn't like about that was the very next night on Raw, Alexa Bliss came out not selling anything and Sasha Banks came out not selling anything. So they'd just done this huge spot, which meant nothing the next night on Raw. And I just thought, well, that's just so typical of now. That's so typical of July 2017 WWE. You do this huge thing, this risky move that should matter, and by the very next day, it might as well not have happened.
Yeah, it's problematic when you do stuff like that. But I do think probably the most disappointing match on the pay-per-view was Miz and Ambrose. I just think it was one match too long for them. I did enjoy the next night when they added Seth Rollins into the mix, and they've kind of got the tension of Rollins and Ambrose because Ambrose doesn't trust them because obviously he turned on him, which is continuity, Finn. Good God Almighty, with continuity. So I think that's jilted some fresh blood into that, and I think that'll be good for SummerSlam. But Miz versus Ambrose at the pay-per-view, I was kind of it felt like that was the piss break match after the women.
Yeah, it was like, why was this match even happening? It's like you've run out of ideas for these guys. And I've got to say, I'm not really. I mean, we didn't mention that. Did we mention that Seth Rollins was beaten by Bray Wyatt? And it was, I don't think we mentioned that. And it was just like, wow, Bray Wyatt has scored a big win. And I know we talked in a previous podcast about how I felt Bray's got a lot of potential as a babyface. And after Wyatt scored that pin on Rollins, he received, I don't know what percentage it was, but at least half the crowd was applauding him. And like, this guy's got babyface potential. And I'm really hoping that they see that and turn him. I mean, I don't want to see, Bray Wyatt, of course, then won in the main event of Raw. So I was like, wow, two consecutive pinfall victories for Bray Wyatt. Has that ever happened before? It probably has.
No, he's never beaten a top guy 2 nights in a row. Never. No, never.
So, and it was a bit, okay, we had the eye poke finish and, it wasn't clean and everything. But it was still 2 pinfalls. So that should matter. But, now we know that Rollins is going into the feud with Miz. You do wonder, where does Bray Wyatt go next as a villain? And I'm not sure about that. And I would like to see him do the turn. That's what I want to see from Wyatt, because I don't think anyone believes in him as a heel anymore, because he's been set up to fail so many times. And if they turn him, the slate will be kind of wiped clean and he'll be shining new again. So that's what I'm hoping is going to happen next.
If only there was a big character who could turn heel and become broken and make Bray Wyatt a big babyface.
Yeah, well, I can't.
Only they had one of those guys.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that doesn't appear likely either, since the Hardys are going to be doing the feud with the Revival.
True, so I guess we'll need to wait a little bit for that, so Bray won't be doing much. But let's talk about the ambulance match. Braun Strowman, Roman Reigns. Braun ends up getting the win. Braun gets put through part of the LED screen. Roman gets chucked off the ambulance and bounces like a frisbee. And then in the end, Braun gets the win because Roman goes for a spear. Braun gets out of the way. But post-match, Roman spears Braun, puts him in the ambulance, takes him backstage, and reverses the ambulance into a truck, which causes Kurt Angle to send Heath Slater and Kurt Hawkins out there to do a impromptu match while he sorts out the situation.
Yeah.
Roman Reigns flees the scene after attempted murder with nobody chasing after him. And, I can't understand why nobody likes this guy. Then Braun Strowman, the valiant babyface, is pried from the ambulance and manages to walk away. Finn, what an angle.
I mean, I always enjoy when they do angles like this. It's trying to spot what's pre-taped and what's live. And WWE is so good at these things that it's really hard to spot the difference. Like, do you remember the famous angle when Triple H was supposedly in the car and Steve Austin lifted the car up with that massive crane thing and then dropped it on its roof?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
That'd be about, what would that be?
2000.
Yeah.
17 years ago.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, it was Survivor. I think was that after the Survivor Series match after Austin made his comeback. Yeah, so yeah, that's coming up 17 years ago. And I remember at the time thinking, how have they done that? And even then, if you go back and watch it, and you sort of, how have they done this? And they're so good at doing these things. It's really hard to spot where the pre-taped thing ends and the live thing starts, and vice versa. Found the angle just bizarre, really. I don't know what it was supposed to achieve. The next night on Raw, the announcers, some people thought, oh, that's it, because everybody, Roman Reigns, he's definitely turning now. It's this sort of like carrot that's like dangled in front of us, Kenny, isn't it? This carrot,
all
that
the
we'll
time.
never ever get. And it's like
it's like when you're a kid and like your mum's like, maybe one day we'll get a puppy. You never get it.
And then finally, when you've gone off the idea of getting the puppy, she says, oh, should we get that puppy now?
You're like, no, fuck off.
So, by the time they're ready to turn Reigns, no one will care. But the thing that got me the next night on Raw was that the announcers did not condemn Roman Reigns for his actions, not once. So they didn't even really volunteer an opinion on whether what he did was right or wrong.
Yeah, I think the thing is, if you're a stickler for storyline continuity and sort of like playing things out, this is infuriating. But if you're able to just enjoy the angle as a one night thing and not think about the fact that they really should turn him, then it's all about how you see it. I do want to say that I thought, to the guy who brought the sign to Raw, Rikishi was driving the ambulance, best sign I've seen in years. It was so good, so good.
Yeah. So, I mean, where does Strowman go now? I mean, we saw him as this tough guy babyface who refused to accept medical attention. So is he now a tough guy babyface? And the announcers didn't really give us sort of indication of how we should think about that either.
No,
so
we had no indication at all.
It's as if WWE doesn't really know what's going to happen next. So, and whenever I see Kurt Angle in these segments, I'm just have flashbacks to his appearance in Sharknado 2.
That's not a good thing to remember. I do want to ask you, before we get on to the main event, which kind of ties in a little bit to Roman and Braun, something that you said before. I think you said it on one of the first podcasts we did, but we never really went into it. You had said that Booker T was good on commentary. And the amount of people that were messaging me during the pay-per-view going, does Finn really think this guy's good? because there was points in the pay-per-view where... Do you remember the bit where Booker T just grunted out of nowhere?
Yeah.
So, like, it seems like in the last couple of weeks, he's gotten progressively worse. Like, he's not... Sometimes he's a heel, sometimes he's a babyface. If ever he does Raw talk, he just talks down to all the talent. What do you think Booker T's strengths are as a commentator, and what are the big weaknesses?
Well, I think what it was that was partly motivated by the knowledge that they were that he was just filling in for David Otunga. So, I think my opinion was something. I was thinking, well, it's one of those things where you sort of convince yourself, yes, this is good, this is better than, this is okay, this isn't great, but it could be worse. And I can't remember exactly what I said in that earlier podcast, and I'm sure, I'm not trying to take that information back. I'm sure the point I made was if I were to say it now, I would believe, or to hear it now, I would think it were valid. But yeah, Booker T is all over the place at times. There's no doubt about it. And sometimes he'll say stuff and you think, wow, where did that come from? Is he a heel or is he a babyface? A lot of his... I like the fact that him and Cole will occasionally have good-natured banter, which I quite like, because often there's a lot of really vindictive stuff on WWE TV. I mean, take this week's SmackDown Live, for instance. Poor Kevin Owens, he had a terrible time in that opening segment. AJ Styles said that Owens had a face like a monkey's butt. And then John Cena, our old pal, referred to Owens as the Michelin Man. So that was all in one segment. So you often have a lot of that sort of stuff. And I was really enjoying some weeks back Cole and Booker T's good-natured banter. And it was just good-natured. And maybe I got a bit carried away. But anyone who wants to say Booker T's commentary is abysmal, is inconsistent, what's he talking about? Hey, you'll have no argument from me, because a lot of times I don't know what he's talking about either.
A lot of people on Sunday were saying, "Bring back Otunga." You've heard Finn there on the Backtrack Express.
Listen, I'd still rather have Booker T than David Otunga. All right, I still would.
Okay. I mean, listen. The very, very sexualized grunts are not what I need to hear. I don't need it. Anyway, we'll move on. So we have Brock Lesnar, Samoa Joe. It goes about 6 minutes. Samoa Joe attacks him during the ring introductions, tries for most of the match to get the Coquina clutch on, but in the end, Brock manages to escape in enough time to do an F5 to put Samoa Joe away. That takes us into Raw, where Brock Lesnar is in the ring with Kurt Angle, and Roman Reigns comes out and says that he should get a title shot because he took care of Braun Strowman for everyone. And then Samoa Joe comes out and just kills it in the segment. Just absolutely taking Lesnar and Roman to town on the mic. And setting up next week, we're going to have Roman Reigns versus Samoa Joe, with the winner going on to SummerSlam to face Brock. So, first of all, what do you think of the match with Brock and Joe? And then how do you think that they handled it on the next night?
I mean, I think it was well done. I mean, Lesnar's sort of Cena-style comeback for the F5 seemed a bit sort of cheesy and a bit Cena-style cartoon wrestling. But afterwards, I felt that Lesnar did a really good job selling the effects of the choke as he's walking backstage. They had the camera right on him. So I would kind of forgave him for that. The damage, I thought there might have been some damage to Joe, but as we saw on Raw the next night, he was still so over, and he did such a strong promo that whatever damage was done by losing to Lesnar so quickly, I think was undone. I think he rebuilt his aura the next night with that super strong promo. So, I mean, as a package, Great Balls of Fire and Raw, I wouldn't say Joe is in a really much worse position now than he was the week before Great Balls of Fire. So I think overall, yeah, they did a really good job. They gave us a finish without harming the guy. And we've now got this Joe Reigns match for next week's Raw, which I think is a match a lot of people really can't wait to see.
Who do you think's going to win?
Well, I fear that we're going to have a non-finish, which will somehow involve Braun Strowman.
I think that I'm all for that. I'm all for that because if we're going to get a fatal 4-way at SummerSlam, imagine that 4-way with those 4 guys.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what we'll get. I mean, I'm figuring Strowman will be back next week. He wasn't on Raw this week, of course. So I think he'll be back next week. He'll be involved in the match. I don't think there'll be a clean finish, and I think it'll either be a 3-way or a 4-way match at SummerSlam. That's my prediction.
Now, my final question on our slightly shorter version of the podcast this week. Kurt Angle. Next week, the secret is revealed. He is going to bring a person to Raw who he loves, and they're going to tell the world together. They're going to tell the world together on Raw. It's someone he loves in Nashville. Who do you think it's going to be?
I don't know. I mean, what did amuse me at first was the thought that perhaps the news that Angle's going to break is that, the WWE Network, they're raising the price and he'll get the heat for it. So that'll be the big reveal. I'll just put it all on Kurt. I have no idea. I mean, everyone's saying it's going to be Stephanie McMahon. That's what everyone's saying. That's going to then lead to a match with The Game, potentially at SummerSlam. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that it'll be Dixie Carter, although she did appear in the Kurt Angle Homecoming documentary. It's going to have to be Stephanie. It really has to be. Who else can it be?
I do think the idea of Stephanie and Kurt having an affair could just be great television if they really just go with it. Because in 2000 when you had Steve Austin, well, Steve Austin was injured, but you had The Rock and The Undertaker and the McMahons and all. But the most hot angle of that year for me was the Kurt Angle, Triple H and Stephanie triangle. I mean, it ended horrifically, but for a couple of months there, it was exceptional television. So if they can somehow find a fresh twist on that, I'm all in. And
I mean, it has to be Stephanie. I mean, who else can
she's due back? She's due back on TV. Although, if they can find a way to do a swerve for 10 seconds and let Dixie come out, I would just love it. I would really, because I just think it'd be the best thing ever. So, and also, if you've not had a chance to watch the WWE 24 Homecoming special on Kurt Angle, really, really great episode of it, 24, so do check it out. Finn, where can people find you if they want to say hello, see what your face looks like, regale you with tales of when they first bought PowerSlam or how they used to read it in the bath, or any of the above?
They can find me on Twitter at Finley Martin or at PowerSlam Online, and at my website at www.finleymartin.co.uk. And I'll just say that I have watched the first 4 episodes of Glow. By the time we record next week, I hope to watch the entire season, and Kenny and I will talk about it then. Because we did say last week that we were going to talk about Glow.
We're just waiting on you, Finn. We're just waiting on you getting around to it.
Exactly. So we'll definitely cover it next week. Where can people find you, Kenny?
You can find me at KennyMC1985. I am heavily considering changing my Twitter handle to Global Force Wrestling since it is available. I'm not even kidding. I'm genuinely considering taking that handle because it would just be funny.
It would be.
You can find me at Global Force Wrestling. No, I wouldn't want to be associated with that. You can find me at KennyMC1985. There's no live events right now, so there's nothing else to plug. Patreon.com/Inside the Ropes is our VIP service. If you want to chuck a little bit of money back to us, you can get the PowerSlam podcast on audio format one day before that you can download on your phone and listen to on the go. So you might want to do that with tons of other content. So thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you for all your support. Please do go and buy one of Finn's ebooks on PowerSlam because they are exceptional, and I'm not just saying that because he does a podcast with us. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.
If I bleed tonight, if I am sad tonight,